Ladies and gentlemen, this is MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is Pia's Revolution. Alright guys, I'm kind of mixing it up now since we did the preview season coverage. I really like the layout of how I had this kind of set up. So I think I'm going to do this probably for some deck techs in the future. So let me know what you think of this. And if not, if you don't like it, we can definitely go back to the other side. But I did want to kind of like get my face and get like more personal in the deck techs, because I feel like they're basically like wham bam thank you ma'am, very quick and easy to ingest. So, but this way I can kind of talk about a card a little bit more in depth. You can always look at the description and the link below and look at the deck list there. But here's just where I can go over each card individually and give just a little bit more context in the deck. But this is Pia's Revolution. This deck is all about getting artifacts onto the battlefield, having them die, and if they don't want to be pinged for 3, you get that card back for free and you can cast it the next turn. So with some of these cards, you can actually pump creatures on your board. You can make your board state wider. You can do a bunch of different stuff that is a lot of fun. So let's just get right into it. Coming up at the 0 mana slot, we have 4 Ornithopter. This is a 0 cost O2, so it's a card that's been reprinted to death. But in standard right now, it's really great at being a early turn caster, really great at being a free play for us, especially with a Ravenous Intruder, which is in the deck as well. So we can sacrifice this to a Ravenous Intruder, get a +2/+2 activation on Ravenous Intruder, and in the early game, they'll probably want to ping themselves for 3, so we might be getting them extra damage on the early game. So if not, this is going to come back over and over again as a sack outlet for Ravenous Intruder, which is amazing. But moving on up from Ravenous Intruder, we've got the 1 mana slot, which is for Bomat Courier. This guy, again, gets in early. He's a 1 mana 1/1, and in the mid game, he can actually fill your hand up again if he gets in turn over turn. So that's also a good thing for us. So against a control strategy or a more mid-range to late game strategy, this is a card that's going to be great to be able to get in, get our damage in, and if we need to sack it to a Ravenous Intruder later in the game, we can definitely do that. The upside to the Courier, as well as when it does die and go to the graveyard, Pia does ping them for 3 again unless this goes back into our hand. So this could be a repeatable effect if it does go to the graveyard, if we want to sack it for the activation cost. But moving on up to the 2 mana slot, we have the Ravenous Intruder. This is a card that's going to win us the game more times than not, other than Pia's Revolution, that is. This is a 2 mana 1/2 Gremlin. Sacrifice an artifact. Ravenous Intruder gets +2/+2 until end of turn. That is awesome. That is aggressive, and that's going to win you a match. Of course, the thing to look out for this card is any kind of fatal push, any kind of instant speed removal. But the best thing about this card is it comes out early. His activation cost is free as long as we want to just sacrifice an artifact on our side of the field. And since we have cards like Servo Schematic, which is in the deck as well, and other kind of cards like Bomat Courier, things like that, it's going to be great for us to kind of get in turn over turn. And keep in mind, the sacrifice an artifact can be done on your opponent's turn as well. So if they're attacking with a big 5/5 or a 6/6, whatever, just sack 3 artifacts, make this guy a 6/7, and then block all day. It's just awesome. But moving on from Ravenous Intruder, we have Reckless Fireweaver, a 2 mana 1/3 Human Artificer. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is actually a pseudo win condition as well for us. So I believe we have 24 artifacts in the main board, and actually artifacts that create other artifacts thanks to Servo Schematic. So whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, it's going to ping your opponent for 1. So if you're sacrificing artifacts to Ravenous Intruder like Servo Schematic, it's going to make an artifact as well, and that artifact's going to ping your opponent for 1 thanks to Reckless Fireweaver. And so it's got a bunch of really good synergy there. I think this is a really aggressive strategy, and I think because it has a toughness of 3, it's going to survive a lot of the early game aggro, so that's great. But moving on from Reckless Fireweaver, we have Filigree Familiar. Is that how you pronounce it? Filigree? I think so. It's a 3 colorless 2/2 fox, which is awesome because foxes are like my favorite animal, you know. Whenever Filigree Familiar enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life, and whenever it dies, you draw a card. So this is a great sack outlet for us, or a great blocker for us. They'll either want to have this card die because it does give us 2 life, and it does give us a card when it dies, and it does ping our opponent for 3 if Pia's Revolution is on the battlefield. So that's the best thing about this card, is that it has such great synergy with Pia's Revolution. So being able to ping, being able to gain life, and being able to draw a card is just so much for just 3 mana. More often than not, they'll want to take the 3 damage for this card because it is just so much card advantage. But moving on up from the Familiar, we have Combustible Gearhulk. This is at the top of our curve, 6/6 construct with first strike. When Combustible Gearhulk enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If that player doesn't, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then Combustible Gearhulk deals damage to that player equal to the total converted mana of those cards. So the best thing about this guy is that he's an artifact, so he can be sacked to Ravenous Intruder if we need him to be. But if not, he's a 6/6 first striker that's probably going to draw you 3 cards outright. So that's awesome already. In the mid to late game, we're going to be blowing through our hand super fast, and this card is going to help us kind of refill our hand, get that gas back in our hand, and continue on with the fight. But that is it on creatures. We have 22 in the deck. That's fairly heavy on the creatures, but we have a lot of really cheap costed creatures that can get out really early, kind of get under control, kind of help go toe-to-toe against a aggressive deck, and also kind of help overwhelm our opponent if they have a lot of spot removal instead of wide board removal. But let's move on to spells here. We have 2 Abrade. This is a card for 3 damage to a target creature or destroy target artifact. Now that target artifact might be our own artifact if we want to have that opponent trigger on a Pia's Revolution. So if we have a Servo Schematic on the battlefield and we don't have a Ravenous Intruder, we can destroy our own artifact, get a 1/1, have Servo Schematic go to the graveyard, ping them for 3, or it gets back into our hand so we can recast it and make another Servo, and so on and so forth. So Abrade is really great for us, and it's really great against our opponent if they're running some sort of a Godpharaoh's Gift deck, stuff like that. So that is really aggressive, and I love it. Another 2-drop in the deck is Harness Lightning. This is a premier removal card. Ixalan coming out has Lightning Strike in the deck, but I think that Harness Lightning is probably still better thanks to cards like Aether Hub, things like that, so it can do a possible 4 damage or 5 damage if the match drags on. So I think this card is still great. I think this card will probably still be playable in Standard, of course, especially in an energy deck, but I think here it's just going to do 3 damage, and it might be replaced with Lightning Strike once Ixalan comes out. But that is it actually for spells. There's only 4 in the deck. Let's move on to artifacts. Moving on to artifacts, we have Implement of Combustion. It is a 1 colorless artifact. You can pay 1 red, sacrifice it, deals 1 damage to target player, and when it goes to the graveyard, you draw a card. So this is a great turn 1 play for us if we don't have a Thopter or if we don't have a Courier on the battlefield to be able to get out and attack in. So this is a card where we play it out, we sack it, we ping our opponent, we draw a card, so it's a bunch of card advantage. It's got a lot of interaction going on here. One of the best things about this card is we can actually sacrifice it ourselves, so that activates Pia's Revolution, so that's a great ability there for us, and it gets us card advantage. So in the early to mid game, they may want to just take the 3 damage, but in the mid to late game, they'll probably just want to put this back into your hand, and you can just do this over and over again, ping them for 1, draw a card, so that's awesome. For 2 mana, you can't beat it. Moving on to another card, we have 2 Key to the City. Again, Key to the City, discard a card up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn, and whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 colorless. If you do, draw a card. So this is a great card for us to get card advantage, a great card for us if we have a bunch of blockers in the way for Ravenous Intruder. So if we have a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield we want to sack, get in for 10 or 6 or 8 damage, that's great for us, and great tempo. Key to the City helps us be aggressive, and we can always just sacrifice it to Ravenous Intruder as well. So there's only 2 in the deck because sometimes we draw into 2 of them, and we can just sack 1 to Ravenous Intruder, so that's great too. But again, the key to this card is that you're going to be gaining card advantage turn over turn if you're out of cards in your main board hand. And moving up to the last 4 artifacts, we have Servo Schematic. This card is amazing. You would not believe how many times we have this kind of artifact loop here where it's in the mid to late game, they have 5 to 3 life left. I sacrifice Servo Schematic to a Ravenous Intruder. It makes a 1/1 Servo. Then that Servo Schematic goes to the graveyard. They don't want to ping themselves, so it goes back into my hand. I tap 2 mana. I play out Servo Schematic in. I make another 1/1. I sack Servo Schematic, making my Ravenous Intruder even larger. Servo Schematic goes to the graveyard, and so on and so forth. So that's a great interaction there. As long as you have 2 mana to play it out, it's amazing. This card with a Key to the City on the battlefield basically means you're going to be swinging in for like an infinite amount of damage. So it's really great as long as you have the mana to tap for a Servo Schematic. And again, keep in mind, Ravenous Intruder doesn't care about it being a non-token or a token artifact or anything like that. It has to just be an artifact. So the 1/1 Servo that it creates here could be sacked to the Ravenous Intruder to give it a +2/+2 buff as well. So that is amazing. So with Servo Schematic and Key to the City, you're basically looking like a Windmill Slam win because this is 3 artifacts right here by making 1/1 and then sacking the Servo and then making another 1/1. So that's 6 damage on top of the 1/2. So that's a 7/8 coming into your opponent's face, and that's almost half of their life total. So that's amazing. Keep in mind that can be done on turn 3, so that's super relevant. And of course, the last 4 cards in the main board besides land is Pia's Revolution. Whenever a non-token artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the hand unless target opponent has Pia's Revolution deal 3 damage to him or her. So this is a card that's going to be great. Servo Schematic tokens do not activate this card at all, but the Servo Schematic tokens are usually going to be for our blocking or to just sack to Ravenous Intruder to be able to pump up. So that's going to be the basic need of these Servo Schematic tokens there. But everything else in the deck, when it dies and goes to the graveyard, it can ping your opponent for 3 unless it goes back into our hand. So that's awesome. It's super aggressive. It's really great on curve, and I would definitely look for this if your opponent is being a little slow. You can get this out early and kind of just get in for damage turn over turn. But let's go over lands really quick in the deck. We have 4 Aether Hub. Aether Hub is here to help give some extra extra energy counters to a Harness Lightning, as well as give us some red energy sources as well. There are a lot of artifacts in the deck. There's not a lot of red sources in the main board, so being able to play an Aether Hub just once to get the energy counter for Harness Lightning, or just once to get some red mana is fine for me. I think that's great. Moving on from that, we have 4 Raminip Ruins. This is a card that's actually going to like secretly win the game for us because it's going to be pinging your opponent for 2 damage on the battlefield. We're going to hold this in our hand until basically turn 4, turn 5, play this out, try and get it for some extra damage, and then ping them down for 2 for the win. So that's a great way to do it. It does ping us for 1 if we want to have red mana, but again, there's not that many cards in the deck that just need red mana, so there's a lot of artifacts in the deck that we can play around with this card, so that's great for us. Moving on from this, we have Scavenger Grounds, because Godfrey's Gift Deck, Embalm, and Eternalized creatures are still a thing, and they're going to be a thing in rotation, because this is a rotation-proof deck. They're still going to be a thing, so this is a way to get rid of an opponent's graveyard, and because we have Raminip Ruins on the battlefield, if we don't need them, we can sacrifice them to empty out a graveyard if we need to, so that's great for us. Moving on from Scavenger Grounds, we have Sunscorched Desert, so it does ping our opponent for 1, it taps for colorless, so we can use it for our artifacts, and it's a desert, so we can sacrifice it to a Scavenger Grounds, or we can sacrifice it to a Raminip Ruins to make sure a Raminip Ruins is on the battlefield for a follow-up activation. So this is a really great card, pings our opponent down. It's really aggressive. I love it. And then the last 7 lands in the deck are just Mountain. So it's just a mono-red artifact deck, so it's awesome. There are 20 lands in total here, so it's a little bit on the low end, but the reason is because we have so many 1, 2, and 0 cost artifacts in the deck, so not needing too many is fine. Our top end is at the Combustible Gearhulk with just 2 in the deck, but those guys will either be discarded thanks to a Key to the City, or if they do get played out, they will be a huge threat that will probably close out the game for you. But let's say our game 1 didn't go too well. What can we do with our sideboard? So here on the sideboard, we have 2 Chandra's Defeat. It's going to be great for getting rid of any kind of Glory Bringers, any kind of red creatures, as well as getting rid of a Chandra Planeswalker, so that is great as well. This is a fantastic card against a mono-red aggro deck, any kind of big bomb flyer, and anything that's kind of like an Izzet deck as well. So this is a card that you want to board in as soon as you see red in their deck, because I guarantee you they're going to have a Glory Bringer in there, at least in the sideboard. Moving on from Chandra's Defeat, we have Aethersphere Harvester, a 3-mana 3/5 flyer that can actually have lifelink. So the life gain in this is very important for us if we're up against a very aggressive strategy. So this is something to board in if you're kind of losing life too quickly, or if you need a flyer for defense, things like that. Remember, an Aethersphere Harvester can block a Glory Bringer, granted that if he doesn't exert it and then you block with it, because they would die for that way, but if he just attacks normally, then you can definitely block a Glory Bringer straight up, which is awesome, and also gain some life from that. So it also gives us energy, so if we need energy for a Harness Lightning as well, we can do that too. So this is a great card. It's also an artifact, so it feeds into our Pia's Revolution strategy as well. Moving on from the Harvester, we have 2 Sweltering Suns. This is a card if we don't have anything on the battlefield, we just have artifacts on the battlefield, we boarded in our Aethersphere Harvester, and we need a way to clear the battlefield for our Bomat Courier or for the Ravenous Intruder, things like that. So Sweltering Suns is great. If you don't need it, you're going to cycle it away, but I think this is a great sideboard tech against any kind of strategy that's going to go wide, especially in post-rotation, thanks to the Vampire decks. That's going to be a big deal in the future. So looking forward to that, and Sweltering Suns is amazing. Next up, we have 2 Gremlin Infestation. This is a weird card for this deck because it seems like it's not really casted that well. It's 4 mana to an enchant artifact. At the beginning of your end step, Gremlin Infestation deals 2 damage to enchanted artifact's controller, and when an enchanted artifact is put into the graveyard, create a 2/2 red gremlin creature token. So the best thing about this card is if you're going up against a Godfrey's Gift deck and they have the 3-mana artifact on the battlefield, just before they get their Godfrey's Gift out, they may have that on the battlefield for the next 4 to 5 turns. So if you do get this out early, it can ping your opponent several points of damage and be able to get your opponent down a little bit lower in life total until they can actually sacrifice that artifact, or if they have Godfrey's Gift on the battlefield, you just enchant it to that, and you just need to play defense until they die. So that's really great. And the best part about this is when that artifact does die, it does give you a 2/2 creature token. So it pings our opponent, it makes us a 2/2, it does a lot of good things, and it's very nice for our strategy. And of course, yes, you can enchant a artifact creature as well. So like a Torrential Gearhulk, they're tapped out, you enchant the Torrential Gearhulk, you're just going to play defense until they die. Not a bad trade. Moving on from Gremlin Infestation, we have 2 Sand Strangler. Because we have 9 deserts in the deck, Sand Strangler is actually quite good for us. It's a little bit high as far as 4 mana, but when it does come down, it can actually ping target creature 3 damage, so that's very relevant for us. This card isn't going to win any kind of power matchup, but against an aggressive strategy, if we need a creature on the battlefield and a way to deal with their creature, this is a good way to deal with both. But moving on from Sand Strangler, we have, of course, 2 Glory Bringer, because who could forget Glory Bringer when you're running red? This card is amazing. It's going to do 4 damage to a target non-dragon creature. It's just going to do a lot of work, and it has haste, so it can actually win a game by itself. One of the best things is this card is probably going to be replacing our Combustible Gearhulk in the deck, so you want to be kind of wary of that. But the card is amazing. And the last 3 cards in the sideboard, we have 1 Hour of Devastation, which of course is our God Hate removal card, and also Planeswalker removal card. So it's going to deal damage to everything in the battlefield, and get it nice and wide for us so we can get in for some damage. Next card is our Free Gem Regent. Because we have 24 or 25 artifacts in the main board of the deck, Free Gem Regent is probably just going to be a 2 mana 4/4 with Improvised Flyer that has fire breathing, so that's amazing. So this is a great card up against a control strategy or a low to the ground strategy where they're kitting us in for 3 to 4 damage or 2 damage per turn thanks to their aggressive creatures. This is a way to block those creatures as well as do some flying and fire breathing damage, so this card is amazing for that. And the last card in the deck is Insult to Injury. Because Ravenous Intruder does so much damage on turn 3, Insult to Injury on a turn 4 activation could do even more damage if we wanted it to. So this is a way to kind of like secretly win the game in game 2 if they're boarding in for a more control strategy, stuff like that. So Insult to Injury is great. I would probably sideboard this in every single time unless we're up against some other strategy that can counter this ability. And this is also a great card against a strategy that's going to be gaining lots of life. So those Crested Sunmare decks, look out because this card is coming for you. But that is the deck. The deck is actually coming to about 24 tickets. It's right above me there. It's a lot of fun. It's super aggressive. And it's rotation proof. So if you guys are wanting to get into a deck that doesn't have any cards that are rotating out when Ixalan releases, this is a great deck that's really solid and really solid, and can also use like Lightning Strike and things like that whenever Ixalan does release, so you have the pieces for a future build. But yeah, like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Let me know what you thought of the format of this video. It's a little bit different, obviously, than the other formats I've been doing, but let me know in the comments below. But as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.